Tammany Hall is a tense game of political control from designer Doug Eckhart and Pandasaurus Games.
In Tammany Hall, players fight to control 19th century New York by managing and manipulating voters in the municipal election. It plays with 3 to 5 players, and it takes about an hour and a half.
Each player starts Tammany Hall with 3 slander tokens and a set of ward boss tokens in their chosen color, one of which goes at the start of the scoring track. The year marker goes at the start of its track, and the immigrant cubes are placed in their starting zones, which are determined by the number of players.
Tammany Hall plays in 4 terms, each of which is made up of 4 years and an election. Each year has 3 phases: Castle Garden, player actions, and end of year.
During the Castle Garden phase, a number of immigrant cubes determined by the number of players is placed in Castle Garden, as long as it doesn't already contain cubes. Next, each player gets a turn to take each of 3 actions in any order, and these are using an office benefit, placing pieces, and slander.
After an election, each player is assigned an office with a special benefit. The chief of police can remove 1 immigrant cube of any color from a ward. The precinct chairman can move 1 immigrant cube from a ward to an adjacent ward as long as that adjacent ward contains at least 1 immigrant cube. Neither the chief of police nor the precinct chairman can remove an immigrant cube if it is the last one in that ward.
The council president can lock up a ward by placing a silver token on it. Now, locking a ward means that no further tokens can be placed in or removed from it until the end of the next election. And this action can only be performed twice per term. The deputy mayor can collect 1 influence token in a color of their choice, and the mayor doesn't get a benefit.
When placing pieces, the active player can either place 2 ward bosses, or they can place 1 ward boss and move 1 immigrant cube from Castle Garden to the map. If they do this, they get 1 political favor chip of the same color as the immigrant cube they just placed.
Now, these ward bosses and immigrant cubes can be placed separately or together in any ward on the map that is currently in play and is not locked up. There's no limit on the total number of ward bosses or immigrant cubes that can be inside a ward.
You can only slander another player in the final 3 terms of the game. You can target another player's ward boss in a ward where you also have a ward boss. And to slander that ward boss, you play 1 slander token and 1 political favor chip of the same color as an immigrant cube that is in that ward. You then remove that ward boss from the ward. You can then immediately move to an adjacent ward and slander another ward boss of that player if there are immigrant cubes in that adjacent ward that match the same color as the ones you used in the first slander. Now, this second action is going to cost you 2 political favor tokens of the same color as the ones you used in the first action.
At the end of the year marker is moved up a space and the next year begins. At the end of a 4-year term, any immigrant cubes that are left in Castle Garden are removed and put back in the bag, and an election is called. This election is going to begin in Ward 1, and then it'll move ward by ward in the direction determined by the arrows.
Each ward boss that a player has in a ward counts as 1 vote. Players then secretly bid political favor chips, matching the color of the immigrant cubes that are in that ward. Then all the tokens are revealed. Each one of those tokens counts as 1 vote. The player who gets the most votes in that ward claims the ward and gets all the benefits associated with it. All of the ward bosses are removed from that ward except for 1 belonging to the player who won.
After all of the ward elections have been decided, the players count up the remaining immigrant cubes of each color in each ward that they won. Now, the player with the most total cubes in 1 color gets 3 political influence chips in that color, and any tie means that both players get the chips. Each player also gets 1 victory point for every ward that they won, and the ward containing Tammany Hall grants 2 victory points.
The player who wins the most wards gets an extra 3 victory points and becomes the mayor. They can then assign a political office to each of the other players. Now, open negotiation and bartering is encouraged throughout any point of this game, but you cannot trade, give away, or barter political favor chips.
At the end of the 4th term, players gain additional victory points for having the most remaining chips in any color and for any unused slander chips. The player with the most victory points wins.
Now, Tammany Hall is quite a complex game, but really when you get right down to it, the mechanics are pretty simple. So this game is going to be quick for you to learn and pick up if you've never played it before, and that's fantastic. The complexity in this game really comes from player interaction. So it comes from that negotiation, that bartering, that interaction, that sort of deduction, guessing what people are doing, social aspects of the game. There is a little bit of a negative that comes along with the social aspect of this game. It is very political. So that means that alliances are going to form. The fact that the mayor gets to give out political offices to other players, that usually means that favoritism is going to come out, and some players might end up feeling like they're being a little bit left out of the action, and that might upset a few players. But that is politics.
So politics aside, another potential challenge in Tammany Hall is that, especially in the later portions of the game, it can be very prone to analysis paralysis. Because more wards open up as you go, the amount of information that you have to process to make your decisions is just naturally going to increase, and that's going to slow some people down when it comes to taking their turns. That being said, the amount of information that's there is what really makes this game interesting. Every decision feels weighty because it's an area control game at heart, and your goal is to, control all of New York, but you don't have the resources to do this without being able to manipulate your opponents, play them off against each other, and otherwise really engage in actual politicking, which makes it very engaging and very, very challenging. I also particularly like the office benefits. Not only do they add just enough of a twist to each term that you're going to be varying your strategy based on which office benefit you have, but they're also often very important to a player's strategy, and so that phase when the mayor is handing them out becomes incredibly important and really adds a lot of life and challenge and energy to the game. This is a great political game that doesn't seem as interesting as it is. On the start, you look at it and you're like, well, it's a map with a bunch of cubes, but there's a lot going on here, and it's a very, very dynamic game.